In this first section, I will start by dealing with the black horse and the many factors leading to the fulfillment of a global famine. We will first start with a series of clips from around the world showing that the entire planet has been suffering from an alarming drought pattern. The clips here are all as recent as 2009 or newer, and then after this you will see many other strange factors contributing to famine that are compounding the effect of the droughts.
When neighbours directed us to Dudley Marrows's farm, they didn't know he'd already abandoned it. For 50 years, the irrigation farmer had nurtured acres of citrus trees on this naturally parched land. But 9 years of drought in the Murray-Darling Basin, one of the worst in Australia's history, finally got the better of him.
The Riverina district in the southwest of New South Wales. It was once famed as Australia's rice bowl. The region was home to Australia's first commercial rice crops. For decades, it's been one of the world's biggest rice exporters, pumping out enough to feed 40 million people every day. The high price of water is essentially driving rice growers here out of business.
The international community is worried this year's low wheat harvest may not meet demand. Drought-stricken Russia, a major global supplier, has decided it won't be exporting any grain until the end of next year's harvest.
The land is parched across a key swath of north-central China. The Plains region produces most of China's winter wheat. Officials say now they're preparing for a severe, long-lasting drought in the area, the worst for 200 years in Shandong province, according to state media.
The drought has affected over 6.5 million hectares of arable land. Dry conditions have also caused a food shortage. 3 million people in Guizhou province and 3 million in Yunnan province are in need of food.
Well, moving on to our focus on the drought situation, more than half the country is dealing with the crippling drought and farmers are fast losing hope of any relief. Jharkhand was one of the first states to declare a drought across all its districts.
Julay Munda shows me his field, which should have been full of crops at this time of year, but lies barren instead.
We've used up all our seeds, but for the last 2 years there hasn't been enough water for our crops to grow. Seeing the desperate situation in our homes, we're thinking, what is the point of living?
Iraq's southern marshes, considered by many as the cradle of Western civilization, are now threatened because of severe drought.
They've been waiting for hours under the scorching sun, but the promise of food is worth the effort for these farmers in the village of Wasya in eastern Syria. The World Food Programme says about 1.3 million people are severely affected. 300,000 are in urgent need of help. Even though food handouts have increased lately, it's a short-term fix. Aboud waits for dark.
Pushed to the very brink by drought-induced famine. With most of their prized livestock wiped out, these villages in Turkana in northern Kenya have only dry wild fruits to depend on.
Now nearly half of Niger's population of 15 million are suffering from acute food shortages. Prolonged drought and crop failure in the arid West African country mean that nearly 20% of children under the age of 5 are suffering from malnutrition. As Jonathan Josephs reports, the United Nations is asking the international community to do more.
And the United Nations is warning that only urgent action from the international community will stop this crisis turning into a disaster.
Farmers and ranchers are used to the unforgiving climate of Bolivia's Chaco, but conditions have gotten worse in recent months. There hasn't been a drop of rain here in nearly a year. Where once there were lakes, there are now only parched mud holes.
Heading into the magnificent Mongolian steppe, a vast stretch of wilderness, one of the great sparsely populated regions of the world, it's a country of 3 million people and 40 million animals, the backbone of the country's economy for hundreds of years. But a summer drought last year has been followed by a bitterly cold winter that has destroyed grazing and killed millions of animals.
It's supposed to be harvest season, but it isn't turning out the way farmers in the northern Philippines had hoped. For 30-year-old Vil Lumapat, already deep in debt, it's yet another knot in the string of bad luck he's had since last year.
The floods then destroyed half my crop. I was trying to recover, and now this.
It's planting season in Thailand, one of the world's biggest producers of rice. But instead of the fields being full of workers, only a few paddies are being tended in the far northern area of Chiang Khong. For these seeds to survive, they need rain, and the skies have not been kind. Facing its worst water shortages in 20 years, Thailand has ordered many of its farmers to delay planting to save water.
This year's dry season is being called one of the worst in decades for Brazil's Amazon rainforest. Key waterways and rivers are completely parched, leaving 25 towns along the water to declare a state of emergency.
Spring began here in October, and Argentina has already lost more than 1 million heads of cattle. Further drought could cement a devastating year for Latin America's top meat producer.
To make a decent living, Sotero Palencia depends on the rain. His crops are dry, and he barely has enough to feed a few farm animals. The economic impact has been devastating for him, and for many other people here whose crops withered away for lack of water. This year, much of rural Mexico has been suffering through its worst drought in 70 years.
On a 15,000-acre cattle ranch in central Texas, Clint Buckland has to sell 600 of his cows because he can't feed them.
It looks like we've got grass, but it's dead and dry.
The problem, the most severe drought this part of Texas has ever seen, means grazing pastures have dried up.
Once it's gone, it's gone. I mean, if they don't get water, the grass is not going to come back.
In fact, throughout central Texas, lake levels have fallen as much as 30 feet below normal. Fields are cracking, and in some places, half the cotton, corn, and sorghum crops have withered away.
Senators Jeff Bingaman and Tom Udall want a drought declaration for 7 counties in southern and eastern New Mexico, which would free up federal aid for farmers and ranchers. The two have asked the Agriculture Department to quickly approve the declaration for Otero, Lincoln, DeBaca, Roosevelt, Lee, Eddy, and Chavez counties.
Between the lack of water and the heat, the summer swelter is wreaking havoc on area crops. Experts say unless we get some substantial rainfall soon, dinner options could shrink and locally grown food may become more expensive. 11 News I-Team reporter David Collins.
Farmers in California, they're losing their land, their crops, and their livelihood, all because of a 2-inch fish. Ainsley Earhart brings us this special investigation.
California's Central Valley is considered by many to be the richest and most productive farmland in the nation. But this land is being threatened by this small, harmless-looking minnow called the Delta smelt. Recently, it has landed on the endangered species list, prompting a federal court to shut down vital pumps to farmers to help preserve it.
What we have today is a man-made drought brought on by laws passed by Congress to where we're taking the breadbasket of the world and starving it of water to save little fish, which is outrageous.
Now you should be realizing just how serious this global drought pattern has become. But as you watch this, what is the first thing you concluded? Global warming? Or some conspiracy theory? Or you might list off many different causes. Or do you conclude that this is somehow God punishing us for our immorality by shutting up the clouds? Or maybe you think this couldn't have anything to do with Revelation because these droughts appear to just have natural causes, and you believe the book of Revelation involves God bringing sensational destruction to the world because Revelation says God will send the destruction. I'm preparing another video to deal specifically with this topic, but in the meantime I want you to consider that so far, this wrath that Revelation warned God would bring upon the world is coming as a direct result of our own actions, and although it would be convenient to blame God, so far we cannot. The Bible indicates that God in no way wants this to happen, but nonetheless must allow it, because He is a God of free choice, and this is the very principle of abomination or idolatry that leads to desolation. As you're about to see, this wrath has come and will continue to come as the direct consequences of our own actions. But will prophecy continue to be fulfilled this way? Now watch as I show you more causes of drought and consequences of man's foolishness and greed, and notice how this same pattern is behind every single one of our troubles.